Hello and welcome back. So the hardest part about these problems is finding which rule to use when you differentiate. So I'm going to give you some examples to help you out. But I think the best way is to just do a whole bunch of problems, and then you'll get more comfortable with all the rules, and it'll become second nature to you. So the first rule we did was a power rule, and the power rule says that if we were looking for x to the n prime, that equals nx to the n minus 1. And examples of this is, say you had x squared, or x cubed, or x to the fourth, or x to any power, it's nx to the n minus 1. Then we had the sum and difference rules. So the sum rule says that if you have two things that are added together, let's call them a plus b, and you were looking for a plus b prime, that is a prime, you can do them separately, a prime plus b prime. So use this when you have, say you had x squared plus x cubed. So you could break this down, and you had x squared plus x cubed prime. You could break this down and you could do x squared prime plus x cubed prime. And then you could solve each one separately using the power rule, just like up here. Then we had the difference rule. Difference rule. And that's pretty similar to the sum rule. It says that if you have a minus b prime, you can break that down into a prime minus b prime. And then you use this on problems which are, say you had x squared minus x cubed. And so you could break this down into x squared prime minus x cubed prime. And then you can do each one separately, and then use the power rule on each one of these separately. Then we came to the product rule. And the product rule says that if you have two things multiplied by each other, notice this is different from the sum rule. They're not added together, but they're multiplied together. Say you had AB prime. This equals A times B prime plus B times A prime. And an example of that was, the one we did was x cubed times e to the x. And if you don't remember how to do this, or don't know how to do this, look for the video that says product rule on it, and I actually solved this problem. So if you see two things multiplied by each other, use the product rule on that. And when you find b prime and a prime, for x cubed, you're gonna have to go back and use the power rule to find x cubed by doing nx to the n minus 1. And then finally, we had the quotient rule. And the quotient rule said that if you have a over b prime, that is b times a prime minus a times b prime all over b squared. And use the quotient rule in problems where you have a quotient, basically. If you have a over b, if you had, for example, t squared plus 1 over t minus 1, or something like that. If you see something similar to this, use the quotient rule. So these are the rules we've done so far. There are a few more rules that we'll get to. I also mentioned a couple things. I mentioned that if you had the derivative of any constant, say 5, is always 0. And I also mentioned that the derivative of e to the x is e to the x. So if you know these rules, you'll be able to solve most of the derivative problems that you get. There are a couple more rules that get a bit more complicated, and then you also have trig derivatives that we'll get to next. But these are the main rules. The hardest part is figuring out which rule to use when. Most of the times you'll have to use one of these rules and the power rule with it. The power rule is the most important, or it's the one that we use the most. So it would be good to memorize the power rule. But these are the rules so far. The next thing we'll do, we'll get to trig derivatives, and then after that we have a couple more rules when we have derivatives that are a bit more complicated than the ones we've been doing so far. So if you have any questions, you can email me at utamatchboxman@gmail.com, and keep watching.